to connect a region of over 600 million bridges between our lands.
Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. On today's headlines. For the first time in 3 years, world leaders gathered in person in New York City for the 77th session of the UN General Assembly, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine was the focus of several speeches. At least 11 children died in an airstrike and firing on a Myanmar village. The UN said an attack the country's junta said targeted rebels hiding in the area. President Bongbong Marcos Jr. sought partnership with investors from the U.S. as the Philippines further reopens its economy amid the pandemic. And Asian markets extended a painful Wall Street sell-off after the Federal Reserve unveiled a third straight jumbo interest rate hike. More were in the pipeline and warned the battle against inflation was straining the U.S. economy. For the first time in 3 years, world leaders gathered in person in New York City for the 77th session of the UN General Assembly. Russia's invasion of Ukraine was a focus of several speeches. Let's listen in.
We must seek solutions that preserve our planet. These solutions must transcend our time and win the future for the succeeding generations. This requires investment in food security, the fragility of which has been clearly demonstrated by the pandemic and the conflict in Ukraine. We need to take concrete steps towards a modern and resilient agriculture. For food is not just a trade commodity, nor is it just a livelihood. It is an existential imperative and a moral one.
Russia has shamelessly violated the core tenets of the United Nations Charter. No more important than the clear prohibition against countries taking the territory of their neighbor by force. And the Kremlin is organizing a sham referenda to try to annex parts of Ukraine, an extremely significant violation of the UN Charter. This world should see these outrageous acts for what they are. Putin claims he had to act because Russia was threatened. But no one threatened Russia, and no one other than Russia sought conflict. Like you, the United States wants this war to end on just terms, on terms we all signed up for, that you cannot seize a nation's territory by force, that the only country standing in the way of that is Russia.
For the first time in the history of this Assembly, we are meeting during a large-scale war of aggression in Europe. And authoritarian states are undermining stability and security around the world. We are cutting off the toxic power and pipelines from authoritarian regimes and strengthening our energy resilience. We will ensure that we can't be coerced or harmed by the reckless actions of rogue actors abroad. And we will transition to a future based on renewable and nuclear energy, while ensuring the gas used during that transition is from reliable sources, including our own North Sea production.
The war has been going on for as long as 7 months, the war provoked by Russian aggression. Recently, it is threatening not only Ukraine, but the entire world, first and foremost Europe, with a nuclear catastrophe. Through attacking, through invoking failure of the nuclear power plants, mainly the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. This war, the war started by Russia and Ukraine, like all other conflicts going on in the world today, must be lost by the aggressor. And this aggressor in this very case is, let me reiterate it once again, the Russian state. More than that, the aggressor, in a sense, has already lost. It has lost because it failed to subdue every nation. It lost because it did not break the spirit of the Ukrainian nation.
For the last 7 months, Russia's war against Ukraine has been taking a terrible toll on the Ukrainian people. Many thousands have been tortured and killed. Millions were displaced or forced to flee their homeland. Today I call on all of you. Look at what is happening in Ukraine. Look at it attentively. Who is the aggressor and who is the victim? Behind the mask of an energy superpower, there is a dangerous imperial power seeking to occupy and annex its neighbors. The deployment of Russian military personnel and weaponry at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant is alarming and totally unacceptable. It disregards the safety and security principles that all members of the International Atomic Energy Agency have committed to respect. A nuclear power plant should never be used as a military base.
Meanwhile, President Putin said that Russia will use all available means to protect its territory, accusing the West of seeking to weaken, divide, and ultimately destroy Russia. Take a look.
Хочу напомнить, что наша страна также располагает различными средствами поражения, а по отдельным компонентам и более современными, чем у стран НАТО. И при угрозе территориальной целостности нашей страны для защиты России и нашего народа мы, безусловно, используем все имеющиеся в нашем распоряжении средства. Это не блеф. Граждане России могут быть уверены, территориальная целостность нашей Родины, наша независимость и свобода будут обеспечены. Подчеркну это еще раз. Всеми имеющимися у нас средствами. А те, кто пытаются шантажировать нас ядерным оружием, должны знать, что роза ветров может развернуться и в их сторону.
Personally, I think that Putin's very unwilling to actually take that step. But what is interesting is the fact that he does seem to be reaching for this kind of rhetoric very easily at the moment. You can see that in a lot of the speeches that he's made over the past year, that are incrementally becoming more apocalyptic, more kind of messianic. And it's very clear that the Kremlin feels that there is some kind of existential threat to Russia, which is why they're deploying this kind of language. They've well acknowledged that in terms of nuclear stockpiles, they would be sufficiently outnumbered by NATO forces. So I think they're very cognizant of that threat, and this would be a sort of a very unlikely and I think also very unwelcome scenario within the Kremlin as well. So, you know, they do have to think about that. But I think it does point to an increasing, not desperation, but an increasing kind of sense that Russia is backed into a corner. And that can always be quite dangerous. Well, I think it's certainly clear that the Ukrainian counteroffensive has sped up this partial mobilization. But I think this was probably coming for quite a long time. There was always going to be the need for more resources the longer that Russia kept the war going. And it's very clear from some of the rhetoric from the Kremlin that they don't intend anytime soon to withdraw from Ukraine and that they're very much in this for the long haul. And to do that, you need a huge amount of resources.
President Putin on Wednesday ordered partial mobilization in Russia in an escalation of what Moscow calls its military operation in pro-Western Ukraine. According to televised remarks from Russia's defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, 300,000 reservists will be called up, or just over 1% of the number of people who can be mobilized in the country. He also said that the line of contact in Ukraine is over 1,000 kilometers long, and the primary goal of mobilization is to help secure territories behind and on the front line. In other news, at least 11 school children died in an airstrike and firing on Myanmar village, according to UNICEF. An attack the country's junta said targeted rebels hiding in the area. The Sagaing region in the country's northwest has seen some of the fiercest fighting, and amid clashes between anti-coup fighters and the military, entire villages have been burned down. The UN Children's Agency condemned Friday's incident in Depeyin Township in Sagaing. It said at least 15 children from the same school are still missing, that according to UNICEF, calling for their immediate safe release. Video footage obtained from a local community group shows a classroom with blood on the floor, damage to the roof, and a mother crying over her son's dead body. The junta confirmed they had sent troops and helicopters to the village after receiving a tip-off that fighters from the Kachin Independence Army, an ethnic rebel group, and from a local anti-coup militia were moving weapons in the area. The military accused the rebel fighters of using civilians as human shields and said it had seized mines and explosives from the village. Save the Children Asia Regional Director Hassan Noor expressed condolences to the families and said schools should be off limits and the safety of students protected. Anti-coup fighters in Myanmar patrolling the smoldering ruins of a burned village after what they say was a reprisal attack by junta troops struggling to crush resistance to last year's military coup. This rare footage obtained by AFP shows the northwest Sagaing region racked by violence and crisscrossed by junta troops, pro-military militias, and anti-coup fighters. Take a look.
ပထမဆုံးကတော့သူတို့မေးလာနိုင်သွားပြီအပြန်မှာသူတို့လမ်းကြောင်းအမှန်မဟုတ်ဘဲနဲ့ကျွန်တော်တို့ရွာကိုခိုက်နှံဖြစ်ပြီးဒါရောက်နှောက်ယှက်ဖြစ်စီးသွားပါတယ်ကျွန်တော်တို့ရွာမှာလည်းအင်ဂျီ60ပြီးရှို့သွားပါတယ်
အဲ့စစ်သားတွေလာလို့နေရတယ်ပေါ့တားလည်းကျမ်းမာရေးမကောင်းဘူးကျမ်းမာရေးမကောင်းတော့ကြတော့သူတယောက်ထဲပြေးတာပြီးတော့စစ်သားတွေလာပဲဆိုတော့စစ်သားတွေကဝိုင်းပြီးရိုက်ပြီးတော့တတ်ပါတယ်အဲ့တတ်ပြတဲ့အချိန်မှာကြားရတယ်ပေါ့ခြုံထဲကနေမှကြားရတယ်အဲ့တော့တားကိုဟောဦးလား
Myanmar's northwest Sagaing region, dozens of local people's defense forces are fighting the military and attempting to overturn the coup it carried out last year. Armed with little more than homemade weapons and knowledge of the local terrain, some of these groups have surprised the military with their effectiveness, according to analysts. Attacks on junta troops and assassinations of pro-junta officials are often followed by bloody reprisals. Villagers have accused junta troops of massacres and of torching villages suspected of backing anti-coup fighters. More than 500,000 people have been displaced in Sagaing since the coup, according to the UN. The military accuses PDFs, which it has declared terrorists, of setting the fires and says their fighters have killed teachers and monks. President Bongbong Marcos Jr. met with Japan Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and World Bank President David Malpass on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. Take a look. Marcos, who is in the U.S. for a 6-day official visit, met Prime Minister Kishida and Mr. Malpass in a separate bilateral meetings. Prime Minister Kishida was among the first world leaders to interact with the president after he won the 2022 presidential elections. In a 15-minute phone call last May, the Japanese leader sought the president's support for the realization of a free and open Indo-Pacific. According to the Manila Times, Prime Minister Kishida promised to continue Tokyo's cooperation with Manila on the economic front, such as infrastructure development, including railways and Subic Bay development. And President Bongbong Marcos Jr. today sought the partnership with investors from the U.S. as the Philippines further reopens its economy amid the pandemic. In a business dialogue with members of the U.S. Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN Business Council, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, President Marcos expressed optimism that the Philippines would be able to forge deals with more American investors and firms. Take a look.
We really have to leverage whatever assets, whatever capabilities, whatever we have, so that we can maximize our ability to grow and to pull the economy. Let us find new ways. Let us find new ways to partner. Let us find new ways to develop. Let us find new ways to strengthen this relationship between the United States, ASEAN, and the Philippines. And in that way, the synergies that we will find in that kind of relationship will be to the benefit of us.
Meanwhile, President Bongbong Marcos Jr. also discussed with former United Kingdom Prime Minister Anthony Charles Lyndon Blair the global economic issues and peace-building initiatives in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. The issues were raised during Marcos' meeting with Blair in New York City. Apart from BARM peace process, President Marcos and Mr. Blair also tackled ways to ensure food security, address climate change, and boost trade. President Marcos is currently in the U.S. for a working visit. Mr. Blair, on the other hand, serves as the current executive chairperson of the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, a non-profit organization that provides support to political leaders and governments to build open, inclusive, and prosperous societies in a globalized world. As the longest-serving Labour Prime Minister of the UK, Mr. Blair's notable accomplishments include overseeing the Northern Irish peace process, public sector reform, and the response to terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001 and July 7, 2005. And the Philippine Army held send-off ceremonies for 2 batteries or 8 units of the newly acquired autonomous truck-mounted howitzer system 155mm self-propelled guns, which will be seeing action in conflict areas in Mindanao. Take a look. PA spokesperson Colonel Cerces Trinidad in a statement said Department of National Defense officer in charge, Undersecretary Jose Faustino Jr., led the send-off ceremonies which took place at the Philippine Army Grandstand in Fort Bonifacio. The 10th Field Artillery Battalion is the mother or primary unit tasked to operate and maintain the 12 newly acquired Atmos self-propelled guns, which are divided into 3 batteries of 4 howitzers each. The Rolling Thunder Battalion was activated in June 2022. Trinidad, in a separate interview, said the Atmos 155mm self-propelled guns are easily deployed, even in rugged terrain, and truck-mounted guns not towed. He added that these new weapons have a maximum range of 41 kilometers depending on the type of ammunition used and have target precision of up to 10-kilometer radius. Trinidad earlier said the Atmos howitzer system is a shoot and scoot weapon that can be rapidly deployed in rugged terrain, and it received Atmos howitzer units in December 2021 from the Israeli defense companies Elbit Systems. Meanwhile, Asian markets extended a painful Wall Street sell-off today after the Federal Reserve unveiled a 3rd straight jumbo interest rate hike and warned that the battle against inflation was straining the U.S. economy. Take a look.
Today, the FOMC raised its policy interest rate by 0.75 of a percentage point, and we anticipate that ongoing increases will be appropriate. We are moving our policy stance purposefully to a level that will be sufficiently restrictive to return inflation to 2%. Restoring price stability will likely require maintaining a restrictive policy stance for some time. The historical record cautions strongly against prematurely loosening policy. Restoring price stability is essential to set the stage for achieving maximum employment and stable prices over the longer run. We will keep at it until we're confident the job is done. Very strong labor market. We have got to get inflation behind us. I wish there were a painless way to do that. There isn't. So what we need to do is get rates up to the point where we're putting meaningful downward pressure on inflation. There's a very high likelihood that we'll have a period of what I've mentioned is below trend growth, by which I mean much lower growth, and we're seeing that now.
Now, all 3 main indexes on Wall Street tumbled as traders contemplated an era of higher for longer rates, which could hit companies' bottom lines. Asia followed suit with Tokyo, Hong Kong, Seoul, Taipei, and Manila, each down at least 1%. Shanghai, Singapore, and Jakarta were also in the red. International Air Transport Association Director General Willie Wash is warning that airline fares would continue to increase if fuel prices continue to rise, and that airlines' recovery would also be delayed if China maintains its coronavirus travel clampdown onto 2023. Take a look.
Our fuel is a significant element of an airline's cost base. If that goes up, the only way that airlines can cover it is to have that higher oil price reflected in ticket prices, which is what, in fact, I think we are seeing in the current year and are likely to see in 2023. In 2023, China remains closed, then it clearly will have an impact on the overall strength of the recovery.
Governments unnecessarily putting restrictions on aviation to sustain political gains in many of the countries around the world, to show that they are, looking after the environment and that aviation is the biggest emitters of CO2, misleading the public who depends so much on aviation for trade, for tourism, for sustaining jobs.
But, I look at Hong Kong, devastated by the policies, not by the virus, let's be honest. It hasn't been devastated by the virus, but devastated by the policies that have been adopted. So Hong Kong has lost its position as a global hub and will struggle to regain it because other hubs have taken advantage of it.
The James Webb Space Telescope has turned its gaze away from the deep universe towards our home solar system, capturing an image of a luminous Neptune and its delicate, dusty rings in detail not seen in decades. Take a look. Now, Neptune is showing off its rings like never before. Thanks to the Webb telescope, this new image is the clearest view of the rings, yet some never have been detected in more than 30 years. Neptune appears as deep blue in previous images taken by the Hubble Space Telescope due to methane in its atmosphere. However, thanks to the Webb telescope, this is also the first time NASA has seen the rings in near-infrared wavelengths, and it's showing the planet as a grayish white with icy clouds streaking the surface. The image also shows an intriguing brightness near the top of Neptune, NASA said, because the planet is tilted away from Earth and takes 164 years to orbit the sun. Astronomers have not yet had a good look at its north pole. Webb spotted 7 of Neptune's 14 known moons. Looming over Neptune in a zoomed-out image is what appears to be a very bright spiky star, but is in fact Triton, Neptune's strange, huge moon, haloed with Webb's famed diffraction spikes. Triton, which is larger than dwarf planet Pluto, appears brighter than Neptune because it is covered in ice, which reflects light. Neptune, meanwhile, absorbs most of the light falling on it. And finally, in our news, President Bongbong Marcos Jr. hailed the Philippine powerlifting team for their successful showing during the 2022 Southeast Asian Cup in Johor, Malaysia. The Filipino team bagged 78 medals, 44 gold, silver, 17 bronze in the men's and women's open and junior categories. Powerlifting Association of the Philippines President Eddie Torres said the Philippine powerlifting team's recent performance shows that the country is one of the powerhouses in powerlifting. Currently, the Philippine powerlifting team is preparing for the Asian Championships in December. The Sea Cup, held from September 15 to the 18th, was organized by the International Powerlifting Federation, Asian Powerlifting Federation, and Malaysian Association for Powerlifting. Powerlifting is a barbell strength sport that revolves around lifting the most amount of weight in each squat, bench press, and deadlift. And thank you for joining us here on ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay in the news because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.